The skies above Zithra were burning. Bright streaks of fire cut through the dark clouds as alien ships clashed in the heavens. Explosions lit the cities below like flashes of dying stars. Queen Valera stood on her palace balcony, watching the destruction unfold. Her heart ached with every blast, every scream, every life lost. She was the queen, the leader of her people. Yet in this moment she felt powerless. Her child, Prince Kale, had been taken during the first wave of the invasion. One moment he had been laughing in the palace gardens, chasing the golden sunbeams that danced over the flowers. The next, soldiers had stormed the palace and the boy had vanished. No one had seen him since. The council told her to focus on strategy, to lead her people through the war, but how could she? Her son's face haunted her every waking thought. She could still hear his laughter, still see the bright curiosity in his golden eyes. The war had changed everything. Once beautiful cities were now crumbling ruins. The forests had burned. Rivers ran black with ash. The people of Zithra, proud and strong, were now weary and broken. Soldiers marched through the streets with heavy armor and heavier hearts. Mothers clutched empty arms. Fathers whispered prayers to nothing. And Queen Valera, though she wore her crown and robes with dignity, felt the weight of grief crush her from the inside. She remembered the first time she held Kale. He had been small and fragile, yet full of life, his tiny fingers curling around hers as if he already knew the world needed courage. She had promised herself then that she would protect him at all costs. That promise had never wavered. Even now, with the fires of war burning around her, she clung to that hope. Somehow, someway, Kale was still alive. The council gathered around her, their faces pale and tense. "Your Majesty," one of them said, "the outer cities are lost. We cannot hold them much longer. Perhaps it is time to consider surrender." Valera shook her head sharply, her long dark hair falling across her shoulders. "Surrender?" she whispered almost to herself. "My son is out there, and I will not surrender while he still lives." Silence filled the room. The counselors looked at her with a mix of fear and admiration. They knew she was strong, but no one could measure the depth of a mother's love. Valera turned away from the council, her eyes scanning the horizon. Smoke rose from distant cities, painting the sky in shades of red and gray. Each plume was a wound on her world, a reminder of what the war had taken. But in the midst of this destruction, a small flame of hope remained, stubborn and fierce, like the heart of her son somewhere beyond the fighting. Night fell, but the fires of war did not. Valera lit no candles, for they seemed meaningless against the vast darkness outside. Instead, she sat on the edge of her throne, touching Kale's empty cradle. Her fingers traced the carvings on the wood, the same carvings he had pressed his tiny hands against so many times. She whispered his name into the cold air of the palace. "Kale, my child, come back to me." Her voice trembled, but she did not cry. She could not yet. She had to be strong for her people, even if her heart ached. Outside, the wind carried the scent of smoke and ash. Somewhere beyond the shattered walls of the city, the war raged on. And somewhere out there, her son was alive. Queen Valera closed her eyes and made a silent vow. "No matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, I will bring my son home. The universe may be at war, but I will not lose him." And in that vow, in the quiet strength of her love, a spark of hope ignited. The war might have stolen her peace, her cities and her people's safety, but it could never take her determination. She was a queen, yes, but more than that, she was a mother. And a mother would fight until the stars themselves fell to protect her child. Far from Zithra, in the black silence of space, a human soldier named Ethan gripped the controls of his ship. His knuckles were white, his jaw tight, and his heart raced. Earth had sent only a few volunteers to assist Zithra in the war, and he had never imagined the horrors he would witness. Planets burned, ships exploded, and millions of lives hung in the balance. Yet through it all, Ethan moved forward, driven by a simple truth he could not ignore. Every life mattered, no matter the species. Ethan's mission had been reconnaissance at first, scouting enemy positions and relaying information to the Zithran resistance. But as the days passed, he found himself doing more, rescuing civilians, delivering supplies, even helping evacuate villages under fire. Humans were strange to the Zithrans. They were taller, hairless in some places, with strange accents, but there was something in their determination, something in their courage, that inspired those who had nearly given up hope. It was during one such mission that Ethan stumbled across a ruined city on Zithra's northern continent. Buildings lay in rubble, streets were cracked and scorched, and the smell of burning metal and ash filled the air. The city was silent except for the faint cries that echoed from beneath the wreckage. Ethan's heart tightened. He followed the sound, weaving through fallen walls and twisted steel, until he came upon a small figure huddled beneath a collapsed archway. It was a child. Golden eyes wide with fear, hair matted with dust and ash, trembling with every heartbeat. Ethan crouched down slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Hey," he said gently, "I'm here to help. You're safe now." The child flinched at first, but the human's voice was calm, steady, and kind. Slowly, Kale, a name Ethan did not yet know, peeked from under his arm and let the human lift him. The boy's small body pressed against Ethan's chest, trembling as if the warmth of another being was unfamiliar. Ethan whispered softly, telling him that he was safe now, that no one would hurt him again. He could feel the boy's tiny hands clutching at his armor, gripping him as though he were holding on to hope itself. Every step Ethan took toward his ship felt like walking a fragile line between safety and disaster. Enemy patrols could appear at any moment, and yet he could not leave the child behind. Not now. The journey back to Zithra's capital was dangerous. Space was filled with pirates, raiders, and enemy ships searching for survivors. Ethan navigated asteroid fields and narrow passages, all while keeping Kale calm. He told stories of Earth, of oceans and mountains, of humans who had once stood against impossible odds. The child listened, eyes wide with wonder, slowly replacing fear with curiosity. For the first time in weeks, Kale laughed, a small, shaky sound that made Ethan's chest ache with relief. During quiet moments, Ethan would glance at the boy, imagining his mother and the pain she must feel. He had read reports of Queen Valera, her strength and wisdom, and he thought of the impossible hope she must cling to. He promised himself that he would not fail her. He would return Kyle to his mother, alive and safe no matter the cost. And so through the endless darkness of space and the chaos of war, a human soldier and an alien child forged a fragile bond. Ethan was no hero yet. He was only a man determined to do what was right. But the courage in his heart, the loyalty in his actions, and the love he showed for this child would change everything. Somewhere out there, Queen Valera waited, unaware that hope was returning to her arms. Ethan tightened his grip on the controls and looked down at Kale, who now clung to him without fear. "We're going home," he whispered. "I promise we'll get you back." And in that promise, fragile but strong, the first spark of a miracle began to glow. Ethan's ship drifted through the endless black of space, carrying Kale in a fragile hope that seemed almost too heavy to hold. The stars outside were distant and cold, shining like tiny diamonds in the darkness. Inside the small cabin, the silence was thick, broken only by the child's quiet breathing and the soft hum of the engines. Kale clung to Ethan like a lifeline, his golden eyes still wide with fear and wonder. The boy had not spoken much since Ethan rescued him. He was small, fragile, and cautious, as if every human he met could be a threat. But Ethan did not rush him. He spoke softly, telling him stories of worlds far away, of brave warriors and of humans who risked everything to save those in need. Slowly, Kale began to listen, his trembling hands relaxing just enough to rest on Ethan's arm. Every day was a test. Asteroid fields tore across their path like jagged teeth, and pirate ships occasionally emerged from the shadows, scanning the stars for survivors or prey. Ethan maneuvered with skill, his heart pounding with the knowledge that if they failed, Kale's life would be lost. The boy's tiny body shook whenever the ship jolted, and Ethan would hold him tighter, whispering reassurance that this storm would pass, that he would not let anything harm him. Kale began to respond in small ways. A soft smile when Ethan told a joke, a shy question about Earth, and once a hesitant reach for Ethan's hand. It was progress, fragile but real. Ethan understood that trust could not be forced. It had to be earned day by day, moment by moment, and he would earn it no matter how long it took. At night, when the stars shone like silent witnesses, Ethan would watch Kale sleep. The boy's golden hair shone faintly in the dim lights of the cabin, and his chest rose and fell with even breaths. Ethan's heart ached with longing, not for himself but for the mother who must be searching, who must be hurting. He thought of Queen Valera and the empty halls of her palace, her eyes scanning the horizon for a son she believed was gone. He promised himself that he would bring Kale back to her alive no matter the cost. The journey was not without danger. One day, a patrol of enemy ships appeared suddenly, their weapons glowing red as they closed in. Ethan's fingers flew across the controls, dodging lasers, weaving between meteors and diving through narrow gaps in the asteroid field. Kale clung to him, silent but terrified. "It's okay," Ethan whispered, even as the ship rocked violently. "I've got you. I will not let them hurt you." Somehow the boy seemed to understand, tightening his small grip on Ethan's arm, placing his trust entirely in the human. After what felt like hours, the patrol ships gave up, retreating into the dark void. Ethan exhaled slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. Kale's small hand found his, squeezing it tightly. "I'm not afraid," Kale whispered, barely audible. Ethan's chest tightened. It was a fragile declaration, but in that moment he knew the boy was beginning to believe, beginning to hope. The journey continued, filled with moments of danger, wonder, and quiet connection. Kale began to ask questions about humans, about Earth, about Ethan himself. He laughed at silly stories, hid behind Ethan during sudden jolts, and once even hugged him without prompting. It was in these small moments that Ethan realized something profound. Courage was not just about fighting. Courage was about love, trust, and the willingness to protect someone who could not protect themselves. And as the twin suns of Zithara grew closer on the horizon, Ethan felt a surge of determination. The boy in his arms was more than just a survivor. He was a symbol, a spark of hope in a universe darkened by war. Ethan's heart swelled with resolve. He would carry Kale through every danger, every shadow, and every fear until the child was safely back in the arms of his mother, where he belonged. "We're almost home," Ethan whispered, brushing Kale's golden hair from his eyes. "I promise, Kale, soon you'll see her again." And in that small, quiet promise, hope shone brighter than any star. On Zithara, the palace was quiet, but the silence carried a weight heavier than any weapon. Queen Valera walked the grand halls, her steps echoing against the cold marble floors. Her crown felt like a burden heavier than usual, pressing down on her temples. She had spent countless days staring at the horizon, searching for a son she feared was gone forever. The war had taken so much, cities, lives, hope, but it had not taken her love. And yet, that love now felt like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. Every room in the palace seemed to whisper memories of Kale. The sunlit nursery, with its tiny cradle and scattered toys, remained untouched. His laughter, once bright and musical, seemed to echo from the walls, fading into shadows. She ran her fingers along the carvings of his favorite animals, her heart aching with the absence of his small, eager hands. "Kale," she whispered, voice trembling, "where are you?" No answer came, only the wind brushing through the broken balcony doors. The council gathered as usual, their faces lined with worry and exhaustion. "Your Majesty," one said cautiously, "we must prepare the city for another attack. The enemy is relentless." Valera turned her eyes on them, hollow yet fierce. "We prepare, yes," she said softly, "but what of my son? How do we protect the heart of this city when my own heart is missing?" Her voice cracked. The council looked away, helpless. They could manage armies, supplies, and defenses, but they could not fill the emptiness of a mother's heart. That night, Valera sat alone in her chambers. The stars over Zithara were obscured by smoke and fire, but she imagined them shining somewhere far beyond the war. She closed her eyes and remembered Kale as he had been, small and curious, with a smile that could light even the darkest day. Her chest ached with longing. She felt every loss the war had caused more deeply now because her son had been taken from her. She thought of the soldiers on the battlefield, the humans, the alien allies, all risking their lives. Yet none of that mattered to her now. Only Kale mattered. She imagined him in danger, alone, frightened, and she shivered. Every story of children lost in the chaos haunted her. Every scream of the wounded echoed in her mind. How could she command, how could she lead when her own heart was in pieces? Hours passed like days. Valera's hands trembled as she touched the empty cradle, tracing every curve, every carved detail. "If you are alive," she whispered, "come back to me. Come home, I will not stop searching. I will not stop hoping." Tears slid silently down her cheeks. She did not cry out. There was no strength left for that. but each drop was a testament to the love she refused to let die. Her advisors came and went, speaking of strategies, reinforcements, and defense plans. Valera nodded to each, but her mind wandered. She imagined the human soldiers fighting for her son, risking everything for a child they did not even know. The thought made her heart ache with gratitude, but also with frustration. Why had she not been able to protect him herself? Why had the universe allowed this cruelty? As dawn approached, the first light of Zithara's twin suns crept through the palace windows, painting the floors gold and crimson. Valera stood at the balcony, staring at the horizon. Somewhere beyond the fire and smoke, her son lived, or she chose to believe he did. That hope was fragile, barely holding together, but it was all she had, and a queen without hope was nothing. "I will find you, Kale," she whispered into the morning air, voice strong despite the tears. "Even if the stars themselves must fall, I will not stop. I will bring you home." And in that vow, heavy with grief and love, a seed of determination took root. The war had stolen much from her, but it could never steal the love of a mother. Somewhere out there, her son lived, and she would not rest until he was back in her arms. The gates of the Zitharan palace creaked open as an unfamiliar ship landed in the courtyard. Guards raised their weapons, their eyes narrowing at the sight of a human stepping down onto alien soil. The war had taught them caution, even fear of outsiders. But this human, tall, steady, and calm, walked forward with something in his arms. Queen Valera, standing on the balcony above, felt a strange flutter in her chest. The council rushed to her side, whispering questions and warnings, but she barely heard them. Her eyes were drawn to the figure below, to the small bundle in his arms. A mother's intuition, honed through years of love and loss, recognized what she had long feared she would never see again. Kyle, her son. The boy's golden eyes, wide and shining, met hers. Time seemed to stop. The sounds of the city, the war, the alarms, all faded into silence. Kyle's lips trembled, and then, without thinking, he reached out. Queen Valera felt tears prick her eyes as he ran into her arms, tiny fingers clutching her robes, clutching her as though he had been lost for an eternity. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her knees nearly gave way as she pressed him close, feeling his warmth, his life, his very soul against her own. She could feel his heartbeat, rapid and uneven, and it mirrored her own. "My child, you're here. You're alive." Ethan stood a few steps back, giving them space. He did not speak. He had not expected to be a part of this moment beyond the delivery of hope. But as Valera held Kale, tears streaming down both of their faces, he felt something swell inside him, pride, humility, and an understanding of the depth of human and alien connection. The palace guards lowered their weapons, watching silently. The council too stepped back, their eyes wide with disbelief and awe. Some whispered prayers, others muttered in shock. No one had expected a human soldier to return a child thought lost to war. Yet here he was, standing quietly as two worlds reunited through love. Kale buried his face into his mother's chest, sobbing softly. His small hands clutched at her robes, refusing to let go. He had survived the horrors of war, the fear and the loneliness. But nothing had prepared him for the warmth of his mother's arms again. Queen Valera stroked his hair, whispering over and over, "You're safe, my son. You're finally safe." Ethan approached slowly, his hands raised slightly in respect. "Your Majesty?" he said softly, voice steady despite the emotional weight around him. I brought him back. He's yours." Valera lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes wide with gratitude and awe. You did this? You saved him?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded. "Not just me," he said quietly. "Humanity did not forget your people. We fight for life, for hope, for those who cannot fight for themselves." Valera's heart swelled. She looked down at Kale, safe in her arms, and then back at Ethan. Then you are a hero," she whispered. "A hero of two worlds." She could not yet find words to express the depth of her gratitude, the relief, the love, the overwhelming mix of emotions that surged through her. But Ethan did not need her to speak. The bond was clear. A human had risked everything to return a life thought lost. Kale looked up at Ethan with wide, curious eyes. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. A small, hesitant smile, but it shone brighter than any weapon or jewel. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice soft but sincere. Ethan crouched slightly, smiling back. "You're welcome, little one. Go be with your mother now. She's waited a long time. Queen Valera held Kale closer, rocking him gently. She felt his weight, his warmth, and the miracle of his survival in every heartbeat. Around them, the war continued outside, but in that moment it did not matter. A mother had her child back. A human had shown courage beyond measure. And in the quiet of the palace courtyard under the alien sky, hope returned. For the first time in many nights, Valera allowed herself to believe fully, not just in survival, not just in strategy, but in the power of love, courage, and unity across worlds. Kale was home, and soon, together, they would face whatever came next. The palace of Zithera was alive with a quiet energy that had not been felt in years. Soldiers and counselors moved through the halls, but their usual tension was softened by the miracle that had occurred. Queen Valera held Kale in her arms, her heart overflowing with love and relief. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to smile fully, to breathe deeply, and to imagine a future beyond destruction. Ethan stayed nearby, quietly observing the reunion. He did not intrude, for this moment belonged to mother and child. But he felt a warmth that went beyond pride. He had crossed galaxies, faced enemies, and risked death for a boy he barely knew. Yet the bond that had grown between them now seemed unbreakable. In saving Kale, he had discovered something extraordinary, that courage and compassion could bridge even the vastest divides. Kale, now nestled safely against his mother's chest, looked up at Ethan with curiosity and admiration. Will you stay?" he asked softly, his small fingers brushing against Ethan's hand. Ethan smiled and nodded. "I will," he said gently. "I'm not going anywhere. Your mother and I, we're friends now, and friends always keep each other safe." The boy's eyes brightened and a small laugh escaped him. Fragile but genuine, it was a sound that seemed to echo through the palace, filling empty corridors with hope. Queen Valera looked at Ethan, her gaze steady and filled with gratitude. "You risked everything for my child," she said quietly. "You are not just brave, you are extraordinary. Humanity has shown me that hope can survive even the darkest times." Ethan shook his head, humility in every gesture. "I only did what any human would hope to do," he said. "We fight not for glory but for life, for hope, for those who cannot protect themselves." Valera nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. She realized then that the universe was larger and more connected than she had ever imagined. Humanity was not just a distant race, they were partners, allies, and even heroes in ways she had never believed possible. The bond forged in that courtyard between a human and an alien child was more than a single act of courage. It was the beginning of a connection between worlds, a promise that life and love could endure across the stars. Over the next few days, Ethan helped with the palace's rebuilding efforts, guiding human volunteers and Zitheran engineers alike. He taught them strategies, shared Earth technology, and most importantly, demonstrated how compassion and courage could inspire entire cities. People watched him with awe, and slowly, the idea that humans were not only allies but protectors began to take root. Mothers showed their children how to greet him, soldiers listened to his advice, and even counselors nodded when he spoke. Kyle stayed close to his mother, but his small hand often reached for Ethan's during meals or walks in the palace gardens. Each gesture, each glance spoke of trust and gratitude. The boy had survived unimaginable fear, but now he was learning something more important. The universe was not only dangerous, it was also full of heroes willing to risk everything for others. One evening, as the twin suns of Zithera set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Valera, Kale, and Ethan stood together on the palace balcony. The wind carried the scent of flowers and burning incense. Kale laughed as he pointed to the stars, asking questions about humans and Earth. Ethan answered patiently, and Valera watched them, her heart swelling with hope and love. In that moment, she understood something profound. The war had scarred their world, yes, but it had also shown the strength of unity. Courage and love were not limited by species. They were universal. And as her son laughed and the human soldier smiled beside them, Queen Valera felt a certainty she had never known before. Her people were not alone. Humanity had arrived, not just as allies, but as friends, as family. The palace walls no longer felt cold or empty. They were alive with connection, with gratitude, and with the promise of a new dawn. The bond between human and Zitheran, between mother and child, had grown into something unbreakable. And as the stars shimmered above, Valera knew this was only the beginning, a future where courage, loyalty, and love could bridge worlds and inspire hope that would never fade. The twin suns of Zithera rose slowly, painting the skies with colors that shimmered like fire and gold. For the first time in years, the palace felt alive. The echoes of war were still present beyond the walls, but inside, hope had returned. Queen Valera held Kale close, his small body warm against her chest. Every heartbeat was a reminder that he was alive, that she had him back, and that the universe still had room for miracles. Kale's laughter filled the halls as he ran through the palace gardens, chasing the butterflies that danced over the flowers. His golden eyes sparkled with joy, unburdened by the fear that had once gripped him so tightly. Valera watched him, a smile spreading across her face, tears of relief and love glistening in her eyes. She realized, as she always had, that no crown or throne could match the power of being a mother. To hold her child again, to see him laugh, was more triumphant than any victory in battle. Ethan walked beside her, quietly observing the reunion, but he did not feel like an outsider. He had risked everything to return Kale to his mother, and in doing so he had become part of something greater than himself. Zithera was not just an alien planet in need of aid. It was a world with families, hearts, and courage that mirrored humanity's own. And in helping one child survive, Ethan had strengthened a bond between two species that would shape the future. "Kyle," Valera said softly, kneeling so her eyes were level with his. "You are safe. You are home, and we are together again." Kale's small hands reached for hers and he nodded, a shy smile lighting his face. "I missed you, Mother," he whispered. "I was scared, but then someone helped me." His gaze turned to Ethan, golden eyes wide with admiration. "And he kept me safe." Valera looked at Ethan, gratitude overflowing in her gaze. "You saved my son," she said quietly. "I cannot thank you enough, humanity. You have shown us courage we could only dream of." Ethan shook his head, a small, humble smile on his face. "I only did what anyone should do," he replied. "But sometimes, the right thing, the brave thing, can change everything." Valera's eyes shimmered with tears. "You have changed our world," she said softly but firmly. "And for that, you will always be remembered." Kyle tugged at her robes, looking up at his mother and Ethan. "Will humans stay?" he asked, voice small but curious. Valera smiled and placed a hand on his head. "Yes," she said. "They will stay, not just as allies but as friends. They fight not just for us but for life, hope, and love. They are part of our family now." Kale's laughter rang out again, brighter than ever, and Ethan's chest swelled with pride. The palace gardens became a place of joy and learning. Humans and Zitherans worked together, rebuilding what the war had destroyed, sharing knowledge, stories, and hope. The soldiers trained side by side, learning from one another, and the children of Zithera began to see humans not as strangers, but as heroes, protectors, and friends. The bond between worlds grew stronger with every passing day. As the suns reached their peak, Valera stood on the balcony, holding Kale's hand and looking out over the city. Smoke from the battlefields lingered in the distance, but it no longer weighed on her heart. She had her child. She had hope. And she had seen humanity's courage in its purest form. The universe was still dangerous, yes, but now it was also full of love, bravery, and loyalty that crossed galaxies. Valera whispered to Kale, "You were never lost. We just had to wait for the right hero to bring you home." Kyle hugged her tightly, and together they watched the suns rise over Zithera, knowing that no matter what challenges came, love, courage, and hope would guide them. Ethan stood behind them, quiet, yet a part of this new dawn. In the heart of the palace, under the warm light of the twin suns, humanity and Zithera found unity. The war had scarred the world, but it had also revealed the strength of hearts willing to fight for one another. A new day had begun. And for the first time, all three, mother, child, and soldier, knew that together they could face anything.